Listen carefully because 2026 will not change for you until you change for you. Most people walk into a new year carrying the same emotional weight, the same reactions, the same patterns, and then they wonder why nothing feels different. But the moment you decide to put yourself first, the universe responds. Your brain reorganizes. Your energy reorganizes. Your future reorganizes. This is the year you stop abandoning yourself and start becoming the person your future is waiting for. What if 2026 became the year where your inner world finally became more important than the noise around you? Because most people are living their lives pulled by demands, opinions, pressures, and expectations. They wake up reacting instead of creating. They give away their energy before they give themselves even one moment of clarity. And then they say, I feel exhausted, confused, unfocused. Of course they do. They are operating from a survival mode brain, a brain trained to please, to rush, to overthink, to ignore its own needs. But the science is clear. When you put yourself first, not in a selfish way, but in a balanced, conscious, intentional way, your nervous system recalibrates. Your decision-making improves. Your emotional stability strengthens. Your creativity reawakens. 2026 is not going to reward the person who runs faster. It will reward the person who becomes more aligned, more present, more connected to who they truly want to be. And that begins with one choice: put yourself first. Your brain cannot create a new life with old emotional habits, because your emotional habits are the operating system behind every decision you make, every reaction you have, and every future you allow yourself to step into. When people say they want change, what they usually mean is that they want a different outcome without changing the emotional state that built their current reality. They want success while staying anxious. They want clarity while staying overwhelmed. They want peace while staying irritated. They want a new future while carrying the same inner chemistry that has kept them stuck for years. But biologically, that's impossible. Your brain is always predicting your next action based on the emotions you consistently practice. And an emotion that is practiced long enough becomes your personality. It becomes the filter through which you interpret life. So if you enter 2026 with the same emotional triggers, the same reactions, the same unconscious patterns, your brain will simply recreate what it already knows. Not because you are incapable of change, but because your brain is designed to protect you by repeating what feels familiar. Familiar doesn't mean healthy, it just means practiced. Emotional habits like doubt, stress, guilt, rushing, or fear become deeply wired neural circuits. They fire automatically, without your permission. These circuits influence the tone of your thoughts, the quality of your decisions, and the limits you place on yourself. And as long as those old emotional habits stay active, your brain will keep producing the same results, the same relationships, the same boundaries, the same outcomes. Real change in 2026 requires new internal wiring, literally. Neuroscience shows that when you introduce your brain to a new emotional experience, when you choose a state like calm, confidence, self-respect, focus, or gratitude, you activate circuits that have been asleep for years. You begin to weaken old patterns by no longer feeding them your attention. Your brain cannot hold two emotional signatures at once, it must choose. And each time you choose a higher emotional state, your brain rewires. Neural pathways that were once rigid begin to soften. New connections begin to form. Your body learns the feeling of a different future before it ever arrives. This is why transformation is not about forcing yourself to change through willpower. It is about training your inner world to feel safe in a new emotional environment. You cannot step into the next version of your life while emotionally anchored to the past. You cannot rise into your potential while carrying the emotional weight of who you used to be. Your brain must experience something new internally so it can expect something new externally. And 2026 will reward the person who rewires from within, not the person who tries to control everything outside of them. When you shift your emotional habits, you shift your identity. When you shift your reality, you shift your reality. New internal wiring creates a new external life. This is not motivational language. It is biological truth. Putting yourself first is not selfish. It is the foundation of coherent decision, making and inner stability. Most people misunderstand this idea because they were conditioned to believe that prioritizing themselves automatically means neglecting others. But the truth is the opposite. When you ignore your own needs, silence your emotions, or suppress your inner signals just to maintain harmony around you, you slowly break the harmony within you. And the moment your internal world becomes chaotic, every decision you make becomes reactive, rushed, or influenced by fear rather than clarity. Putting yourself first means you are giving your brain and nervous system permission to operate from a state of balance instead of survival. When you consistently put others before yourself, your body remains in a stress-driven loop. You say yes when you want to say no. You force yourself into commitments that drain you. You accept situations that erode your peace. Over time, this creates emotional instability, not because the world is overwhelming, but because you are disconnected from your own internal compass. When you prioritize yourself, you reconnect with that compass. You create the mental space necessary for clear thinking. You begin to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. Think of your mind as a system of energy allocation. Every choice you make consumes energy. When you put yourself last, that energy is constantly leaking through overthinking, guilt, self-doubt, and emotional fatigue. Your cognitive resources get scattered. You struggle to concentrate. Your emotions become inconsistent. You lose the ability to evaluate situations logically. Putting yourself first closes those leaks. It grounds you. It organizes your internal world so your perceptions and judgments come from alignment rather than confusion. Coherent decision-making only occurs when your mind is structured, calm, and centered. That internal coherence becomes impossible when you are stretched thin trying to fulfill everyone else's expectations. Inner stability is not a gift. It is the result of choosing yourself daily. It is built through boundaries, rest, emotional honesty, and self-respect. When you choose yourself, your nervous system shifts from chaos to order. Your thoughts settle, your breathing deepens, and your emotional responses become more measured. Instead of feeling pulled by the world, you feel anchored within yourself. This anchoring gives you the strength to make better decisions. Decisions that reflect your values, your goals, and your long-term well-being. When you put yourself first, you are not closing the door on others. You are elevating your capacity to show up for them with presence and authenticity rather than exhaustion and resentment. You become more patient, more understanding, and more stable because your foundation is secure. You are no longer reacting from emptiness, you are responding from fullness. You are no longer navigating life from a fragmented self. You are moving from a unified one. Putting yourself first is not an act of selfishness. It is the most responsible thing you can do for your mind, your emotions, your relationships, and your future. It is the starting point for a life that is intentional, grounded, and internally strong. Your environment mirrors your internal state. Change within, and the external circumstances reshape. Most people believe life shifts from the outside first: a new job, a new partner, a new opportunity, a new place. But in reality, the external world is responding to a deeper, invisible source. The patterns you hold in your mind, the emotions you rehearse in your body, and the expectations you project onto your future. Your environment is not just physical, it is psychological. It reflects the signals you broadcast through your moods, your thoughts, and the way you carry yourself. When your internal world is chaotic, full of self-doubt, stress, and unresolved emotional habits, your environment becomes a mirror of that chaos. You attract distractions, conflicts, pressure, and situations that reinforce the state you are already living in. Not because life is against you, but because your nervous system is tuned to notice and engage with what matches its familiar emotional frequency. The opposite is also true. When you cultivate inner clarity, emotional balance, and self-respect, your environment adjusts to those changes. The people you interact with respond differently. You begin selecting different opportunities, speaking differently, and holding different boundaries. A person who feels grounded internally does not tolerate the same noise, drama, and instability they once accepted. Their internal state filters what is allowed into their external world. It's not mystical, it is neurological. Your brain's reticular activating system is constantly scanning your surroundings for information that aligns with your dominant internal state. When you shift that internal state, the filter changes. Suddenly you see solutions where you used to see barriers. You recognize supportive people where you used to focus on negativity. You notice possibilities you were once blind to. Nothing outside actually changed. You did, and your perception reorganized reality around your new emotional and mental patterns. This is why inner work is not optional. Your environment cannot evolve beyond the identity you insist on living from. If your internal world is trained in survival, rushing, pleasing, worrying, overthinking, then your external world becomes a collection of circumstances that keep you in survival. You meet people who drain you. You encounter challenges that push you to the edge. You feel stuck in cycles that repeat, not because they are inevitable, but because your internal state is familiar with them. The body believes stress is normal, so it unconsciously seeks what validates that belief. But when you decide to shift into creation, calmness, intention, clarity, your environment begins to reflect a different version of you. You attract stability, healthier connections, better opportunities, and a sense of flow. The world becomes less reactive and more responsive. You no longer chase, things begin aligning. This is the power of inner change. You become a different signal in the world, and the external environment, like a precise mirror, adjusts to match the frequency you now live in. 2 to 26 will reward the person who chooses intention over autopilot, presence over distraction. Because the truth is, most people aren't actually living their lives. They're repeating them. They wake up and instantly fall into the same habitual emotions, the same thought loops, the same reactions, the same digital noise, the same pressures, the same environment pulling them in 10 directions at once. Their bodies are moving, but their minds are asleep. Their days are full, but their hearts are empty. Their time is consumed, but nothing inside them evolves. And then they wonder why every new year feels exactly like the last one. But something shifts the moment a human being becomes intentional. Intention is not about forcing life, it's about directing your inner energy before the world directs it for you. It means you wake up and ask, what emotional state do I want to live in today? Because you understand that your emotions shape your perception shapes your decisions, and your decisions shape your future. When you walk into 2026 with that kind of inner direction, the entire structure of your brain begins to reorganize. Neural pathways connected to stress begin to quiet. Pathways connected to clarity, creativity, and grounded confidence become stronger. Your mind stops operating on old scripts and starts writing new ones. Presence is the amplifier of that intention. When you are present, you are no longer living from memory. You are living from awareness. You stop running on autopilot, that unconscious state where your body is acting out yesterday, last week, last year. Presence breaks the loop. It stops the cycle of reacting and teaches you to respond. It brings your mind back to the only place where change actually happens, the present moment. Distraction is the enemy of that process. Every time you check your phone, scroll aimlessly, react emotionally, or lose yourself in noise, your brain splits its attention into fragments. And fragmented attention leads to fragmented identity. You stop knowing what you want, what you feel, what you value, what your future is supposed to look like. Distraction disconnects you from yourself. Presence reconnects you. 2026 will reward the person who notices this. The person who realizes that every moment of attention is an investment, either in the old self or the future self. When you choose presence, your nervous system calms, your stress hormones lower, your mind clears. You can think deeper, see clearer, and act with purpose instead of fear. Opportunities that were invisible in distraction suddenly become visible in awareness. You notice things others overlook. You catch ideas others miss. You feel alignment others never experience. Intention and presence give you an advantage that has nothing to do with luck, talent, or circumstances. It is an inner advantage, a neurological, emotional, and energetic upgrade. The world will move fast in 2026. People will drift. People will numb themselves. People will lose time without realizing it. But the one who chooses intention over autopilot and presence over distraction will navigate the year with strength, clarity, and a future-building mindset that sets them apart from everyone else. Every time you prioritize yourself, you signal your nervous system to step into a higher future. This isn't poetic language, it's biological reality. Your nervous system is constantly reading your decisions, your emotional tone, and your internal state. It listens to the way you speak to yourself, the choices you make under pressure, and the boundaries you enforce or fail to enforce. When you continuously choose everyone else's comfort over your own well-being, you teach your nervous system that your needs are secondary. It learns that stress is normal, that self-neglect is expected, and that your value comes from what you give rather than who you are. Over time, your body memorizes this pattern so deeply that it becomes your automatic identity. You begin to move through life as if you owe the world your energy, even when your internal world is starving. But the moment you begin to prioritize yourself, everything inside you shifts. Your nervous system interprets this as a new instruction, a new blueprint for how you expect to live. When you choose rest instead of overextension, your body recognizes a change in direction. When you speak up instead of staying silent, you tell your brain that your voice matters. When you slow down instead of rushing into decisions, you train your mind to operate from clarity rather than survival. Each small, intentional act of self-support is like a signal sent into the deeper layers of your biology, saying, "We are no longer living by the old program." This internal shift is powerful because your nervous system doesn't just react, it adapts. It reorganizes its patterns based on the emotional environment you create. Prioritizing yourself builds new neural pathways that associate peace with safety, confidence with familiarity, and boundaries with stability. You begin to operate from a state of inner authority rather than emotional chaos. Your body stops anticipating stress as the default and instead begins to anticipate direction, calm, and purpose. The more consistently you make choices that honor your well-being, the more your nervous system aligns with a vision of a higher future. It starts expecting better days instead of preparing for setbacks. It stops bracing for impact and begins expanding into possibility. Your thoughts become less reactive and more intentional. Your emotions become less chaotic and more regulated. You feel a subtle, steady sense of power returning, not from force, but from alignment. This is not just mindset work, it's physiological evolution. By prioritizing yourself, you teach your nervous system that you are safe with yourself. When you hold your boundaries, you create internal trust. When you invest time in your growth, you build internal credibility. Your body begins to feel like a place where your future can actually grow. And when your nervous system feels safe, focused, and supported, it allows you to step into a version of yourself that is more capable, more centered, and more connected to the life you're trying to create. This is how prioritizing yourself becomes the doorway to a higher future, because your biology follows the identity you choose, not the one you inherited from old patterns. Self-prioritization is far more than a motivational idea. It is a biological reset that rewires the systems inside you that have been conditioned to run on stress. Most people don't realize that the body becomes addicted to familiar emotional states. If your daily life is filled with rushing, pleasing, overthinking, or suppressing your own needs, your nervous system starts to believe that this is normal. Your brain memorizes that tension. Your body stores it. Your hormones repeat it. And without even noticing, you begin living in a state where stress becomes your primary operating system. When you finally choose to put yourself first, you interrupt that entire cycle. You send a new signal through your biology, a signal that says, "I am no longer living by the pressures around me. I am living by the intentions within me." This single shift begins transforming everything from your brain chemistry to your emotional patterns. Stress narrows your perception. It makes you reactive, impatient, and unable to see possibilities. Your brain locks onto survival-based thinking: what's wrong? What could go wrong? How do I avoid discomfort? But when you choose self-prioritization, through rest, boundaries, reflection, or simply giving your mind a moment of stillness, you activate a different part of the brain. This part is responsible for problem-solving, creativity, and long-term vision. You move out of survival and into creation. Your biological state shifts from contraction to expansion. Clarity begins to emerge because your mind is no longer cluttered with the urgency of everyone else's demands. Creativity awakens because your brain is not fighting to protect you from imagined threats. When the nervous system relaxes, blood flow increases to the frontal lobe, the center of higher thinking. This is why many people get their best ideas when they finally slow down. Their biology stops defending and starts expressing. They reconnect with inspiration, with focus, with that inner voice that often gets drowned by stress. And then comes confidence, not the loud kind, but the grounded kind that comes from alignment. When you put yourself first, you show your mind and body that your needs matter. You teach your emotions that your inner world deserves attention. This builds internal trust. You stop abandoning yourself, and your subconscious senses that. Confidence grows because you are no longer negotiating with your own worth. You are living it. Self-prioritization is not about pushing people away. It is about pulling yourself back into your own life. It's about giving your biology permission to reset, to break free from the chemical patterns of stress and step into a state where clarity becomes natural, creativity becomes accessible, and confidence becomes a byproduct of taking care of your inner world. When you choose yourself, your body responds with alignment, your mind responds with focus, your future responds with opportunity.